at Pros now, design manager. And yeah, I used to work in fashion design for a long time as a manager, doing children's licensed activewear for brands like Reebok and Nike. And then I transitioned over to UX a couple of years ago. My company that I started with was acquired by Pros about 2 years ago. So I've been very fortunate to have a bunch of amazing colleagues at Pros and this larger user research team that we could all kind of join and to kind of guide us on research. So super passionate about this topic, really excited to chat with you guys today. Jen, anything else you'd like to add before I switch over to sharing my presentation?
No, I'm just looking. Oh yeah, sorry. One more thing I need to mention. If you have any question, feel free to raise your hand or just type in your question in the chat and I will gather them. So Brooke will answer the questions at once, or maybe during her presentation. Anyway, she will answer them, don't worry.
Perfect.
Cheers.
Yeah, I will try my best. But feel free to like come off mute if you have a really dire question you want to get out right away. Cool. All right, everyone can see my screen, I'm assuming. All right, so as I said, I'm really passionate about this topic. This is something that me and my team were like kind of looking for someone to guide us on for a very, very long time. And as I mentioned, I'm really fortunate they have a bunch of awesome colleagues at Pros that were able to kind of guide us. But I'm hoping that this today can kind of be a guide for you if you're just getting started on this journey of creating a user research program. Maybe you're in the midst of it, or maybe you're just kind of curious. Hopefully this can kind of give you that push to kind of just get started. You don't need someone's permission to do so, and it's definitely critical that we're doing research. Okay, all right. So in a cross-industry study of 630 US and UK executives by the consulting firm Accenture, 57% of the executives reported that inability to meet customers' needs have resulted in failures of new products or services. So just let that sink in for a little bit. That is a staggering number. If you are struggling to get buy-in from your organization to do user research, this is an amazing thing to show to them. The data is there. We need to be figuring out what customers' needs and what their goals are to start to make sure that we're creating the right product. So research is critical, but it can get overlooked a lot of times for a number of reasons. So some things are short timelines. Perhaps you work like my team does in an agile environment, and you have these really short deadlines that you need to get done. It feels like user research is the last thing you have time to do. Maybe your product managers or your stakeholders are kind of pushing you to get things out. So that could be one kind of setback. Another thing could be misconceptions about user research. I found this to be really true. A lot of people think that user research is always usability testing. A lot of people just don't have the knowledge of what the different kind of methods we have in our toolkit are. And there's also kind of a misnomer that it's going to take a lot of time. So I think it's our job as UX designers to kind of break down those barriers. The other thing is resource or budget constraints. Maybe you're a team of one designer or you don't have a dedicated UX researcher, only have one working across a ton of products. Maybe you don't have budget to pay user research participants. So that can be a little bit challenging. So we're going to work through some ways you can get around that today. And then another thing could be prioritizing customer requests. So a lot of companies kind of get bogged down in this and customers are giving feedback, they're complaining. And a lot of times this is happening because we're not doing research throughout. We're not iterating on our products. We're just launching them out there, getting feedback, and then we're like inundated with requests. So my advice is to be doing research throughout, getting feedback and iterating upon it. So you have happy customers too. And then the other thing is just low UX maturity. So maybe again, like your organization doesn't understand a lot about the value of UX or research. So some of the benefits of a user research program are increased user satisfaction and customer retention. Everyone loves to kind of talk about themselves. Most customers and most people in general like to give feedback, right? So you can really reduce customer churn, and this is a great opportunity to do so by engaging with your customers from the beginning and just throughout the product lifecycle. Another thing is reduced design and development costs. So if you are designing solutions and not really focusing on the problems, you could be designing the wrong thing. So it's really important you're designing the right thing from the beginning so you're not having to rework. I think as designers, a lot of times we get really fixated on like creating the perfect solution. And a lot of times we just need to be okay launching the first iteration and not being heads down for months and then having to rework it later. And then the third part is obviously improved decision-making informed by data. That is a great thing that we can do with our research, and it's great to not have to use assumptions and to be able to inform our roadmap and our decision-making better. So don't rely on assumptions in my advice. So without research, I find as a people leader and a manager, a lot of times, if you're not doing research, the designers on your team really don't feel confident in what they're designing because they don't understand the problem space. They don't understand the problems that they're solving. They're maybe not fully understanding what all the use cases are. They're missing some edge cases. And that can, of course, lead to a really suboptimal user experience and also just some lack of confidence in our products, right? And the experience. So really important to not rely on assumptions, use research. So I'm going to start with the story here about Legos. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with Lego Group. So in the 1980s and the 1990s, Lego Group was rapidly expanding into a ton of different industries. So they were in theme parks, action parks, game shows, television shows, you name it. And these designers, it was an awesome time to be a designer at Lego because they had total creative freedom. They were launching the Lego City line with all these like really cool futuristic components. And they could just kind of run wild, and they created these really complex new components for the Legos that had really high production costs. So several years later, sales were decreasing, and the Lego Group was losing nearly $1 million every day in the early 2000s. So that is a staggering number, of course. But the long story short here was that kids just didn't like the new products, but they weren't doing research, so they didn't know why. So in 2004, a new CEO joined Lego Group. He decided to cut costs, so designers couldn't just run free anymore and design any type of product that they wanted. They couldn't use any amount of specialized components. They really needed to kind of get back to their main product, which was plastic building blocks that we all know today, and get away from like all these theme parks and amusement parks and stuff that was kind of distracting their focus as well. And what he decided to do was to send out teams of researchers for a year all over the world to observe user behaviors, to find out what kids were doing, like how they were playing, why, and where they were playing. So they didn't observe just Legos. They also observed kids playing with things like a shoe in the room or some other thing that they'd come to really like to play with, and it wasn't necessarily a toy sometimes. So what they found in the age of like computer games, a lot of the designers had just assumed that kids really wanted this instant gratification. They thought that kids wanted to just immediately have success. And what they found actually was that kids like to really be challenged, and they like to be able to progressively master something. And that's what they actually liked about these computer games. They wanted to kind of show off to their friends what they had done. And then they also found that kids really didn't want like a futuristic product. They didn't care about all these flashy things they were creating. They wanted their fire truck to just look like a fire truck. They wanted something familiar. And then another thing they found in Japanese culture was that they were marketing their Legos as educational toys. It really didn't work in that market because it needed to be either educational or a toy. So blurring the line between it, parents didn't want their kids playing with the Legos anymore. And then the last thing, they were mostly focused on their kid user base. But what they found was that these adult fans that they had, they'd always kind of ignored for a long time. Their adult fans, they kind of outcast as like weird, and they didn't really want to involve with them. They wanted to stay kind of far away. They thought it was weird that they were playing with their Legos to start with. But what they realized when they spoke to them was that these adult fans had really amazing ideas. They could inspire the kids. They actually went on to employ a lot of the adult fans as designers. And they also found that they could drive a ton of profit from this. So they even still today design all of these Lego launches just for this adult market and fan base, and they can charge a lot more money for it too. So long story short, Lego City became a best-selling product. So that was the product that was really failing. And if they hadn't done user research, that probably would not be the case. It's still a best-selling product today. It's one of their top two. And in 2023, Lego reported 2% annual revenue growth, generating $9.66 billion in revenue launching 370 new products. So I'm sure if they hadn't done user research, this story would be much different. We might not even be talking about it today. So that's a great just kind of story on why we shouldn't maybe be identifying different user bases and not making assumptions. So now I'm just going to kind of go into more of like step-by-steps, a little bit about our process and ways that you guys can use user research in your organizations. So first, sit down, kind of define your goals and objectives, figure out what you want to achieve with this research, what you're hoping to learn, and then identify your target users. So maybe like Lego, you know, you have this kids user base, but maybe you also want to tap into the adults. Perhaps it's a new product, you don't know who your users are. Maybe that's part of your goal to find out, and then identify the products. And then from there, determine which kind of research methods you're going to utilize. So the research methods are going to depend on the project, and also your timeline, your budget, and things like that. So the next part is create a timeline, figure out what kind of deadline you want to give yourself, and then assign resources and responsibilities to it. So is it just going to be one person leading all the UX research, or are you going to be distributing it across the team? What does that look like, and what is everyone responsible for, and who's getting kind of informed instead? And then create a process for documenting your research study so your stakeholders know what to expect of this research team and what's happening. And then define a format and expectations for sharing results. So are you going to be sharing weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, maybe quarterly on your progress? I would recommend sharing as much as possible, but make sure it's something that's digestible and actually you can stick to, right? You have enough time to do so. So that's kind of how you can do it in general, but the way that this looked for my organization, so as I mentioned, my previous company that I joined was acquired by Pros about 2 years ago. So I was really fortunate to join this larger, broader UX team who has a really amazing researcher with a PhD. I have a boss who's like super on board with research and was really able to help me get stakeholder buy-in as well. But so what we did is I sat down with the researcher and I wrote down our goals. We talked about the existing pain points that we have today, what we're hoping to achieve. And then we talked about risks that could impede the research program. So things like not getting executives on board, maybe getting some pushback because of tight timelines and things like that. Or maybe like budget, who was going to own it, not having a dedicated UX researcher. So how could we approach that? And so just really being realistic on what your goals are. I was super fortunate to have, you know, this amazing team surrounding me, but you don't need that. I will say that's like my biggest advice here for a long time. My team was always kind of looking for someone to come in, show us how to do research, kind of like tell the rest of the stakeholders who weren't on board to do it. And you don't need that. You just need to start doing it, is my really practical advice. So the elephant in the room, though, was always how could we incorporate user research without losing our ability to innovate quickly? So as I said, we were in an agile environment, so we were pushing out products really quickly. We didn't want to lose that kind of like ability to work fast, and we didn't want to lose any revenue as a business. So what could we do? And how could I get everyone to be on board with research? So the answer is we needed to be scrappy, right? We needed to do some lightweight user research. We needed to get started with this, and we needed to show the value of what the research was. So you might be saying that sounds all well and good, but maybe your day looks more like this. Maybe you're responsible for like all these different things in your job. And I see Jen laughing. And I think it's definitely a reality. It's a reality for my team too. We work like across UX, UI, we do research. And I think we're a really powerful, amazing team, but it can be definitely overwhelming at first, like where to get started. You're like, how am I possibly going to fit it in with all these other things? And how am I going to master all of it? You don't need to be like a master at user research to start, would be my first advice. Get started. If you don't know anything about it, there's such an amazing community like Hexagon here that can teach you guys some of these things. There's amazing mentors in the space that are willing to help. There's so many articles and like free tutorials and courses that you guys can take to learn more about research. But I would just say start small, maybe kind of time block your time by the week. Like, am I going to dedicate a couple hours a day, 1 day a week to research? Maybe every other week I work on research. What's that going to look like? And try to just make it more digestible for yourself. So some user research methods that you can use that are more like lightweight that we really focused our program on were user interviews. So a good way to gather requirements about what a user flow needs to satisfy user needs. We also did a lot of usability testing to test if prototypes or production UIs are user-friendly, and then identify areas for improvement. We did a lot of A/B testing to decide which designs were better. This one I love, especially when I can't get someone on board with doing user research for a certain product. Once they start to ask me, like, Brooke, should we do design A or design B or even design C? That's when I say, oh, great question. Let's do some research. Let's talk to some users. And no one's ever told me no to that, right? So you just need to kind of figure out like where these things fit into your workflow. Another great one is competitive intelligence. So this is like a really low effort. So you can evaluate what your competitors are doing to make sure you're keeping up with market needs. Surveys are great because you can quickly gather quantitative data about user need, goals, and satisfaction. I love to do this one too. If someone tells me we don't have time to do survey research, then I do a survey because I can do that kind of on my own and I can share it back with them. And once they see the data, then they're on board and they're like, okay, actually we can do some user interviews or some usability testing. So you have to get a little bit creative sometimes. But once people see the results and the impact, they always get on board. And then the final one that we utilized in this first like 6 months of creating our program was card sorting. So we wanted to evaluate the optimal structure and navigation by asking users to organize items into categories. So really good for information architecture. So another thing that we kind of did though, when we were sitting down, was trying to figure out like what had the most impacts, so the value, and then try to determine versus like the effort and the volume of users needed. So my boss and I had actually sat down and created the slide together to share at my kind of end of the year research recap of our program with executives. And this was really great because we even kind of like quizzed them on, okay, if we're trying to solve this problem and test this, which of these methods would we use? And it was a great way to engage with them and also kind of teach them about all the different research methods that our team can do and the value it provides. So this is obviously based on like the context. If you already have a prototype available or a production UI, it might be lower effort to do that. So it's going to depend on your project, but I would definitely say like look at this and kind of determine what makes the most sense based on your budget and your timeline. So the next thing that we did was we were very overwhelmed at this point, right? When we were creating our strategy for research, we'd been wanting to do it for such a long time. There were so many different products that we wanted to test and just so much to do. And we had so many assumptions about what our users thought, but we didn't really know for sure. So me and my research lead sat down and we decided to start with in-app surveys. So this is something that Pros has been doing forever to gauge the overall user satisfaction of their products. They do these every year. And it's a really great way that we could add this into our admin UIs and we didn't need any like developer resources because we use a tool called app queues. So we could launch these like right away. And it was really easy to get buy-in from other team members because it was requiring no effort of them, but they were getting back all this feedback, right? So it's a really great way to capture low-hanging fruit. And then from there, we did focus groups. So I, again, was very overwhelmed, as I said at first. And I was like, I want to test product XYZ. But who better to ask like what we should test and validate our assumptions than the customer-facing teams who are speaking to users all the time. So we sat down with the CS teams and the product support teams, and we talked about like which products had the most dire user research needs. And a lot of these things were things I was already thinking, but it was really great to hear firsthand and also to create this kind of camaraderie with that team and get people really on board to do research. So these people are still people that I reach out to anytime I need users, I need to get someone on board with something for my research program. They are the best. And we even went so far as to create like company goals around user research because of this program. So they are really involved in our UX research now and see the value of our team. So that's just a great way also to create allies across the company, right? So then from there, we obviously did user research and we decided which methods based on our timeline and budget and resources available. So you can kind of integrate this into your process by allocating a dedicated user researcher, designer, or in my case, multiple across things. I like to kind of divvy this up in my team because my team's very interested in user research and wants to kind of flex that muscle and learn more. So a lot of times I will lead the research program and I'll facilitate the usability testing and stuff like that, but they'll sit in and they'll do notes and sometimes they'll switch off. So I definitely recommend like divvying up the work if you can, so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. But again, if you're a team of one, it's okay, you can still do it. And then build user research into your project timelines or sprints. So I think a bad habit people have sometimes is doing research in like the in-between. So really start to try to plan out your research like a quarter in advance, even a year in advance if you can. But at most at the beginning of each like project kickoff, speak to your product manager and figure out when you're going to do research and which method you're going to use. And then, like I said, utilize lightweight research methods to get started, do market research, competitive analysis, surveys if you can, usability testing. It doesn't all need to be like contextual interviews. You don't need to go on a ton of site visits just to get started. So start small, aim big, choose research methodologies that best suit your project needs, like I said, and then target a few projects or features that'll have a large impact. So we decided that we were going to target just 3 projects to start. Obviously, there was like way more we wanted to do, but our goal was really 3 large user research studies. And that felt a lot more manageable to do in 6 months. But definitely give yourself a goal, because if you don't give yourself a goal, it's never going to happen. So just get started is my true advice here. And then use a value versus effort matrix for prioritization. So ideally, you want to have things that are high impact, low or medium effort. If something's going to be high effort and low impact, that's not really something you want to prioritize when you're getting started. And then just kind of try to start to like standardize your process as much as you can. So when we first started getting started and I had people on my team taking notes for me, we didn't really have like a standard template that we were using, and it got kind of messy pretty quickly. And I had to go in and like redo a lot of things. So it's really nice to have people have like a template that you're using so everyone knows what the expectation is of them as well. You can put your recordings, advertisements, the dates, and try to keep those as clean as possible, because people will go in and read those if you make it easy to read and digestible for them. And then we also have things like recruitment email templates, interview introductions, interview questions that we can even kind of utilize across multiple research studies, so it doesn't feel like such a large effort every time. So standardize as much as possible. And then share. I think this is my biggest takeaway. I probably keep saying that, but this one is so important. I really don't think it makes a lot of sense to be doing research if you're not sharing back the impact of the program and what you're doing. The worst thing you can kind of do for your customers is to take all their feedback and then not do anything with it. Then you're going to have a lot of unhappy customers, and you've wasted all this effort and time, and you're not actually iterating your product, right? So you need to share this with your stakeholders. You can't just do everything that is requested of you too, right? So that's the part of make decisions. So, and every time we do note-taking, when we do like a user interview or usability testing, at the top of our Confluence page, I generally have these like KPIs where I'll write down like the success, the error rates, the task completion, the overall user satisfaction score for the study. Key findings, this might be things like any aha moments that you had. These might even be user quotes, or it could be as simple as like design A, 4 out of 6 users preferred it, versus design B if you're doing A/B testing. And try to just create some key takeaways so you can very quickly share this with your stakeholders, and so they see what you guys are up to and they can kind of see what the next steps are going to be. And then decisions needed, this is the space that I like to utilize to tag my like product managers as I'm going to, and my developers to kind of see if I need feedback on the technical feasibility of something. Maybe a user brought something up that was out of scope, so we need to decide if we're going to do it now for the MVP or we're going to do it later. Or perhaps only one user brought something up, or maybe it's even a really good idea, but it's not in line with the business goals and the product vision. So that's really important. We might not want to do that. So try to put your business hat on too when you're thinking about decisions needed. I think a lot of people have this misconception that when researchers are going to go and do user research, that they're going to take all of the customers' feedback and they're going to sit down and they're now going to iterate for like 6 months and scrap everything. And that's really not the case. So I would try to prioritize things too, so there's no longer that kind of fear. And you really can't do it alone. So make others part of the collective success of your program. I think this is the biggest part about getting buy-in. If you can make people feel engaged and like they were part of this, they're going to naturally get on board. So executives should really be the one to provide support and resources for you, maybe budget for these things. Product managers are going to provide feedback on the technical feasibility for the improvements, incorporate your recommendations into the product vision. Developers are going to include usability improvements into development. The UX researcher, if you have one, is going to conduct user research studies and analyze data. And then UX designers are going to incorporate the findings into design solutions. So get everyone involved as much as possible. Product support people, customer success teams are also amazing champions for this as well. And they're going to help you to recruit users and all of that. So super, super important. So some best practices is just foster collaboration between teams and set expectations. Let them know when you're going to be sharing things, how much user research you're going to be doing and when they can expect like the next iteration if you're iterating upon it. And then focus on problems. Don't jump to creating solutions. I think we probably all know that as UX designers, but it's good to say. And then communicate your findings regularly to stakeholders. So I personally, when I first got it started, I did a lot of presentations where I would show case studies of a couple of different research studies that we did, what the impact was, what the findings were. I purposely tried to include multiple kinds of methods so I could kind of break down that stigma of research is always usability testing. And I showed them things like competitive analysis and how we can utilize that as designers and as a business as well. And then prioritize user needs and feedback alongside business needs. So make sure it makes sense for your product vision and set expectations with your users too. And then measure success always. So include KPIs to evaluate the success of your product, task success or error rates, user satisfaction scores, time spent on tasks, and then continue to evaluate and refine your program as needed. So this year, maybe the first 6 months, it was like 3 research studies. This year, we'll shoot for a lot more. And we'll probably be doing ones that require a bit more time and effort. So lessons learned, don't assume cross-functional teams understand the importance of user research or your process. I think that's a lot of people get used to hearing kind of no when they first join an organization that maybe has like lower UX maturity or doesn't have a dedicated UX team or a dedicated researcher. But it's not really that people are telling you no. I found that people just don't really understand what user research means a lot of the time. And they don't understand how they can help them. So feel free to ask people, have an open conversation about that. Ask them if they have any experience working with UX designers or researchers, what that experience is, if they understand like what the methods are, and explain to them the different tools in your toolkit. A lot of our product managers actually asked us for that. They said they didn't really understand what all the methods were, when should they start using them and why, and how long is it going to take. So create that open dialogue, get people excited about it. So I'll leave you guys with this. Within the first 6 months of our research program, we exceeded our research study goal by over 200%. So we were aiming for 3 user research studies. We ended up doing 10. We were getting so excited about it, and everyone in the company was asking us to do research. So this could be you too. I didn't think a year ago that this would be the case. So really, really excited about this. And yeah, I will pass it back to Jen now.
Thank you. Yeah, so anyone has, well, I'll start because I have some questions. So I work in a small startup. Mm-hmm. So I want, because you mentioned several times about stakeholder. So who's your stakeholder and how do you make product decision? Because my personal experience was after the research, I communicate or share the result with my boss, who is supposed to be the product owner, but I always feel like he would deprioritize the results because he wants to ship the MVP and there's just like more features he wants to add to the product instead of like fixing what we have. And we always have to wait till maybe like 3 months or 6 months later, the client's reviewing the product and they come back again with the same suggestion, and then you say, oh yeah, let's fix this. But I'm like, I told you this like 6 months ago. So what's your thought about this?
That's a really hard one. Yeah, I think most people can probably empathize with that. A couple of different things. I mean, I would say like document it in a way where it's very visible for people, whether that means emails, Confluence, somewhere it's digestible. I find sometimes if you tell people things in meetings, sometimes they move on to the next meeting, right? They kind of forget about it. So make sure it's like always visible to them and it's easy for them to find again. The other thing is when people tell me they won't do research, I generally will say, and they need to ship something, I'll say, okay, but I'm going to do it like the next sprint, right? Like I'm going to test it in the production UI. The production UI testing could be quite different than what's in your Figma prototype or whatever you're using for your prototyping. So I would definitely say that. And if people are telling you no, I also sometimes will test things with internal users. So I think that's one part I kind of left out. We started most of our user research with internal users. I mean, we're lucky enough to have a lot of like admin UIs where our internal users are helping our customers. So that actually could kind of give you a good understanding. But you could literally just go up to your coworker or ping them on Zoom if you're remote, which I think you said you were, Jen, and ask them to test something out for you. And I think if you see that, if they see that very clearly and visually, like it'll be kind of hard to argue with, right? Like I think clear usability issues, any type of user can find a lot of them. So I would say get a little bit crafty with it and don't let the no be a hard no, find some other ways around it.
And according to your experience, like who's the one that making product decision in your company?
Yeah, product managers generally, but customer success is very involved. So that's where I like to, if I'm, if someone isn't quite seeing like what we're seeing from a user's perspective, I'll try to ping one of my customer success counterparts and kind of get their perspective, see if they're hearing the same feedback from other customers. Again, I'll even get them to test something and if I need to. But yeah, it's generally product manager and the customer success people are heavily involved too. But it's hard even to get like executives buy-in the beginning too, right? If they're not used to it, people are very uncomfortable with the idea of research because we're getting feedback, right? People don't want to hear negative things about their products. So something I also like to do is I like to frame things by always including like a positive in there, right? Like, okay, maybe this didn't perform very well and we went with the option that I preferred and not you, but at the end of the day, we got like a 7 out of 10 satisfaction score or something, or you got like one user that said something very nice, the other 5 maybe didn't, but try to start your presentation or your session with that to start out on like a good note. Yeah.
Good. I think Michelle's asking about the AI tools in your process.
Yes, good question. Good question. We are adding a lot of AI into our products right now, but I will say everyone's is a little bit different what they're utilizing. Like I use it a lot to kind of summarize notes and stuff, nothing proprietary, anything like that. But it can kind of help us just to like help with our workflow sometimes to summarize user interview notes. Again, you need to make sure there's no confidential data or anything in there first. But that's been very helpful for our team. And we're starting to add it a lot into our products. So more to come there. I don't know, Michelle, was it? Yes, Michelle, do you have any like specific tools you're curious about or workflows you guys are trying to use it for? You can chat it too if you.
Well, I guess if we're doing user interviews, it's always nice to have our company. We use older AI. The transcript. Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, Otter's great. I used to use it a long time ago before pros. Yeah, I think that's always a good way. But yeah, you have to make sure you scrub out of the confidential information, so we can't really use something like that. But we have it in tools like Atlassian and some of our products where we can go through and summarize things. We use it a lot when we're doing ideation sessions. We use BigJam and Miro and stuff to kind of like create sentiment, so neutral, positive, and stuff like that, negative. And that helps us a lot with our workflow.
Anyone else have questions? Otherwise, I'm gonna ask Brooke about the Houston UX community. Okay. Well then, yeah, I'm just curious because you work at Pros and Pros is I think it's a very important company in Houston in terms of UX. So what's your experience and what do you think about the UX community in Houston?
Yeah. I'm personally based in Miami. So I don't have a ton of experience with the Houston community. I have a bunch of amazing colleagues that are there who I've visited a couple of times. My boss, Robbie, is super involved in the Houston community as well. But no, I don't personally have a lot of experience. Sorry to say.
But how big is your team right now?
Oh, let's see. We have 4 people in the office right now. 5. Yeah. Hold on. Sorry.
5. And that includes all the UX designers and researchers at pros?
Yeah, we have 5 UX people. We have a UI design manager. We have a VP of design and user experience. We have a UX strategist. Who else do we have? A new researcher that just joined. Yeah. So we're trying to get more people back into the Houston office. We have a really amazing office space there. I've been fortunate to visit a couple of times. And then we have some people in the Miami office too. We have I have a designer in North Carolina. I have another one in South Florida, one in Bulgaria. So we kind of have people all over, like representing our customers and like all the different time zones that we have. But yeah, a very core part of our UX team is still based in the Houston office, and they go to a lot of like different lunches and stuff like that. So it's super, super nice. How's love with you guys in the, oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been able to volunteer and apprentice on some design and research projects.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, as I work on applying for jobs, what are some good sort of interview questions that I can ask to kind of get a baseline on how they deal with research in their company?
Great question. So let me think about this. Yeah, I have a lot of tips. Well, I would definitely just in general try to ask people about their culture. Like I'm super fortunate to be at Pros because we have the most amazing culture. All of our people are so awesome. We really love research. So I feel like that would come through in all of our interviews. But I would definitely ask them like how much user research they do, what the role is of the UX team in user research would be one of my main questions, kind of what the UX maturity of the company is. I think that's really important. I mean, you can phrase it in ways where it's kind of like, what is the UX maturity at the company, or what is the role and how do they influence the products maybe to kind of see how people react to that. I mean, you could just ask them if they're doing research, if they have any dedicated user researchers on the teams. If you don't want to be that direct, you could ask like what kinds of methods they use for doing research, what the kind of timelines or like budgets are for that might be a good one. You could also see like what they think about qual versus quant. Like that's always a good one too, to kind of gauge how people react to that too. And then, yeah, in general, I would just probably ask them like why the role exists. And yeah, is it like a new opening? Is it something that just came up? Like what's the reason for it? You could ask them how long people typically stay at the company. That's a good one. Hopefully you'll kind of get that gist though. Does anyone else? Yeah. Do you want more, Kristen? I can go forever.
I mean, at this point, anything that can help me out, I'm good for.
I mean, I think like aside from just questions, I think I would just try to take notes. Don't like obviously take notes as that can happen too in your interview, but try to take notes after your interview, right? So take notes about everything you heard, what that person said, because if you go through a long interview process, you might forget what you said too, vice versa. So take notes about that. And then I would kind of ask them like what the strengths are of a researcher or designer or whatever on the team. I always love to hear from people, and this is one I've always asked too, is like, what would I need to do in my first 3, 6 months, a year to succeed in this role? What would that look like? But really just like show your enthusiasm. I think sometimes people get really nervous and they don't seem excited about the role. And we always love to have someone that's really excited to be in the role, is excited about research, wants to hear more, right? So show your enthusiasm and try not to get like super nervous because you're also interviewing them at the end of the day. And I would try to have that mindset when you're interviewing too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know like the market is pretty difficult right now. So.
Yeah, I think John and I were talking about that before. Like I would say, don't get discouraged. I have people that I mentor right now, and I think people are very discouraged about the market and stories that they hear. And I think there's a lot of, yes, it is, but I think there's a lot of confirmation bias too. So try not to get discouraged. You will find something. There's so many resources out there, and just try to, get creative. Like try to do some freelancing, try to do some like small projects on the side if you can, and just really like show that you know what you're doing and act confident. I think everyone has, doesn't feel super confident when they're first starting a role, right? It's natural. But don't try not to like get baked down in that imposter syndrome and really feel confident. Like I know my skill set, I know what I'm learning. As UX designers, we're always learning. Like Figma changes like every day, right? So we're constantly upskilling, and that's normal. So I think people will just be excited to see someone that's excited about it and willing to learn more and be super transparent. Like, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm willing to learn it, and I can learn quickly, and I will do XYZ to learn it.
I think Brooke was mentioning that pros, they do have like summer intern or all year long.
We generally do summer interns, I believe. Yeah, we have some people starting abroad, and then I think we're looking for one right now. I could be wrong, so don't quote me. But yeah, we do usually have like interns. So I would say, like, don't feel if you have the resources and you can do an internship, that's a good way in the door too at different companies as well. So I mean, I did a lot of like freelance stuff when I was first starting out. I was used to be a fashion designer, and I career transitioned via General Assembly boot camp. So I did like small little projects with people, or I would like volunteer to redo my friend's website or something like that on the side. But yeah, try not to get too bogged down, and good luck.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have advice for Kristen on job search questions?
Well, are you like specifically searching for research or design or?
I started out looking specifically for research, but at this point, I'm just looking for anything UX related so that I can get my foot in, get some skills worked on, and then I can kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah.
That would definitely be my advice too. I think that's a great way to approach it. Definitely be open. Like I always really enjoyed user research. I get to do that now in my role, and I'm really lucky to do that. So things are always flexible and can change too, right? So, and I think it's nice to sometimes be, I always wanted kind of like a large company, and I was lucky that now I've had the experience of both. But it's fun to like start small too, and then you get to learn so many things really quickly. So be open.
Yeah, sometimes I think, especially for researchers, sometimes a company would ask for like a higher qualification, like for PhD or something. So yeah, this designer or like general product design might be slightly easier. I don't know, but
Yeah. My other feedback would just be to, if it says you need a PhD or you need a certain amount of years of experience, just apply anyways.
yeah.
Like, don't let that stop you.
Ignore that. Well, I guess, would you like to make a like closing speech? I don't know, closing.
Sure. No, I just want to say, Jen, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone on the call for joining. I know it's kind of a late even in Houston. So really glad I could be here and talk about research. I know it probably feels daunting, feels overwhelming. I did not think I would be giving this talk a year ago. So that's just kind of amazing what you can do in a year. And Kristen, in a year, hopefully you'll be giving a talk like this, and everyone else on this call. So don't let that like stop you, and don't have that imposter syndrome. Don't feel like you always need someone to come in and tell you what to do. Just start doing it, right? And I think that's our greatest skill as designers. We can show the impact like right away.
Yeah.
Data. So.
Yeah, that was great. I learned a lot, and well, and it's kind of soothed me that you're mentioning some struggle like I've been through as well, or I am being through as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I would like to remind everyone that this Saturday is our summer social, 4 o'clock at Honey Art Cafe. It's in our meetup, and our next virtual event is gonna be super. I can't say super, but it's gonna be really special because we have a speaker who lost her hearing after a short break with a newborn. So she will share her experience on accessibility tools and her story on UX with us. And that would be probably June 20th. We will announce on Meetup soon. So stay tuned, everyone. Thank you. And if you haven't, please join our Slack because we post most of our info there. And if you have any questions about research, you feel free. It's not my place to say, but maybe you can ask
Feel
Brooke.
free to reach out. Yes, 100%. Feel free to reach out to me if you need anything, if you need coaching on research, or you're feeling like you're struggling in the job search or anything like that, or in your role, you're not sure where to get started on research or something else. I'm super happy to chat with you all. My LinkedIn should be in the thing, so feel free to shoot me a message.
Yes. Well, the LinkedIn is at Meetup, so go check it out. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brooke. Have a good night and a good summer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.